everyone. In this video we're going to be making a meal that I made with my mama growing up, and it is corned beef, stewed tomatoes, and rice. And this is the corned beef that you see in that weird little can with the key on the side of it. And if you've ever been cleaning out an older person's house and found that weird little drawer with a bunch of these little keys that don't have any sides on them and have a little hole in the top of them, that's what those are from. And in the video, I'm going to show you how to open those cans. I'm going to show you how to use this. But this is what some people might refer to as a struggle meal, but this is not what we ever use it as. It was just a great meal that we all really enjoyed. So I'm going to show you how to use this. The great thing about this meal is that everything that we're using is shelf stable. So these are all things that you can use that if you want to stock up on stuff and keep it in your house for a while, or if you're out of power and don't want to open your fridge up, you can cook all of these things without using anything that requires refrigeration. There is some butter that we're using in this recipe, but you can very easily replace that with something like cooking oil, or if you have to, you can even leave that out. So this is a very easy recipe to use if you are trying to use things that are completely shelf stable out of the pantry, or that you are trying to stockpile things to use at a later date. Or if you are getting things from a food pantry and you get that little can of corned beef and you don't know what to do with it, well, this video is going to show you how to use it. The other thing we're going to show you how to do in this video is that I prefer to use diced tomatoes for this video, and we are using canned tomatoes, but all I had was whole tomatoes. So I'm just going to show you a quick and easy trick to turn those canned whole tomatoes into diced tomatoes. And so it might be that you want to always buy whole tomatoes so that you have the most versatile version of canned tomatoes at all times when you're purchasing them. So come along and learn one of my favorite family recipes that some people now might refer to as a struggle meal, but for me it just takes me back to really good memories of cooking at my Mima's house. The ingredients for this are for an entire meal, so they're a little bit random. So you're going to use a can of corned beef. Make sure it's the square can, not corned beef hash. You want 1 onion. If you don't have onion, you can use onion powder or just leave it out. You want a 28-ounce can of tomatoes, 2 cups of rice, white rice is best, 4 cups of water, about 4 tablespoons of butter, but you can use cooking oil if you don't have butter, and then just as flavor enhancers, bouillon, a little bit of sugar, some salt, and some pepper. So to start out with, you're going to put your rice, your water, and 1 to 2 teaspoons of bouillon if you have it. We're using salt-free, about a tablespoon of butter, and some salt and pepper into a pot. Then you're just going to put this on the stove and bring it to a boil. This is a pretty standard procedure for making rice. I know some people rinse their rice, and that's not the way that I grew up making rice. I do rinse my rice if I'm making sushi, but I'm not necessarily worried about this being really sticky. If you're using whole tomatoes instead of canned diced tomatoes, you can use kitchen shears to cut those into a dice, which is going to allow you to buy the most versatile form of tomatoes and just make them work for what you have. So here's how you're going to do that. Just pick up the tomatoes, and then you're going to cut a crisscross in the end of it to just cut a little X, and then you're going to cut those across to make them into the cubes. And this goes pretty fast. It's not too difficult, but it does end up making sure that you don't have to buy more than one type of tomatoes. If you have any cuts or hangnails on your hands, please wear gloves, because the acid from the tomatoes getting into those is going to make it a little bit painful for you. So I strongly recommend wearing gloves if you have any sort of open cuts on your hands. If you don't have any injuries, though, you really don't need gloves. There's a lot of people on the internet that are policing handling food with hands. We are going to be cooking these tomatoes like crazy, so handling them with hands is not a concern at all. Also, if you have fresh tomatoes from your garden for this, you'll just need to concasse those. This is a great way to use up a lot of tomatoes if you have more than you think you can use. So in order to concasse tomatoes, if you don't know how to do that, you can check out our video on pico de gallo for directions on how to concasse. That is a way to peel, seed, and chop tomatoes to get the skin off, so you're wasting as little of that tomato as humanly possible. Once you have all of those tomatoes cut up into pieces, you're going to put the remainder of that juice into the pot as well. You're going to add some salt, some pepper, about 2 tablespoons of sugar, and a tablespoon of butter. If you are trying to watch your sugar, or you've got somebody in your family that's diabetic, Splenda actually works for this pretty well, and so you can use a sugar substitute. and then you're going to put this on the stove on medium heat, and you can put a lid on it to retain some heat as well. Once you are getting it back over to that stove, the rice should be on a boil. You're going to stir that up, cover it, turn your heat to low, and set a timer for 30 minutes. So now we are putting our tomatoes on medium, and stir those occasionally until your rice is done, and we are covering that with a lid to retain the heat as well, and that also is going to just keep you from splashing tomatoes all over your stove. So you're going to put your skillet on medium heat and add some butter or oil to the pan. If you're using butter, you want to heat that up until the butter foams a little bit. Your oil is not going to foam, but the butter foaming is just going to give it a little bit more flavor, and so that helps out a little bit. You're going to add your onions and cook those until browned and stir those up occasionally. You might need to break those up a little bit with your spoon. Add some pepper into those onions as well, just to give a little bit of flavor. While your onions are cooking, we are going to open the corned beef. And opening the corned beef is a little bit of a process. You're going to start out by taking that key off and setting it off to the side. And make sure you don't lose that. This is what the key looks like. I have found it easier to open these if you take the label off, because if you leave the label on, then as you are turning it around, it collects a little bit of paper with the whole thing. And so I pull the label off before I open it. So then you're going to take the key, and there's a little flap on the bottom of the can, and so you're going to take the key, and it was attached to that flap to begin with, and just attach the key with the loop of the key below the can. You're basically taking the key off and turning it in the opposite direction of where it was. And then you are just rotating that key to the right until the key pops off with the metal that you have been peeling off. And you just rotate that around, and it's going to make a little ring around the bottom of the can. And I am not speeding up or slowing down this part of the video so you can see about how long it takes. And it just pops right off. As you are doing that, you might want to keep on stirring your onions. And then we are going to grab a can opener that is called a church key. It's just the type that pops a little tab in there. And that is going to pop a hole in the top of the large part of the can. And this is going to allow air into the top of the can so that it does not suction to the can itself. So it just kind of releases the corned beef from the can. And then I usually just kind of use a butter knife to release the corned beef. And if you just run it in there. Now be very, very careful that you're not touching the edges of the can, because it is very, very sharp. And it should just pop back out. You're going to break up the corned beef in the pan and brown that together with the onions. And this is just going to develop a little bit of flavor, and then you're just going to add a little bit of water to thin it out so it'll go over the rice, and then you're just cooking that on low until your rice is done. And then you serve, I usually do 2 piles of rice, one for my corned beef and one for my tomatoes. My husband prefers his all in one pile, but it's a very filling meal. It's a really easy meal, and it can be made completely from shelf-stable ingredients. So thank you so much for joining us this week. And as a reminder, we have our 2 different membership levels that I would love for you guys to join. We're going to try to do some live streams where we are able to interact with you guys in real time. So we're super excited to start those up pretty soon. And we'll also have early access to videos and things like that. So thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.